Have you ever felt out of place at parties, family dinners, or superficial conversations at work? Have you ever wondered if the problem lies with you or with the world around you? Michel de Montaigne, one of the greatest thinkers in history, believed that brilliant minds were not meant to be lost in useless social interactions. Today, you will understand why, according to him, true sages distance themselves from the crowd, and how this can transform your life. Number 1. Solitude. As the territory of geniuses, Michel de Montaigne saw solitude not as a punishment, but as a sacred territory, the true home of brilliant minds. For him, the ability to withdraw from the world and immerse oneself in oneself was one of the greatest virtues of human beings. In his famous Essays, Montaigne wrote that we should reserve a space just for ourselves, a corner of the soul where no one else could enter. And this space, according to him, must be cultivated with care, silence, and attention. Brilliant minds, by their questioning and reflective nature, need isolation not out of misanthropy, but out of necessity. They observe the world with different eyes, see beyond the surface, and feel a weight when involved in shallow, routine interactions. Solitude offers something that social life can never give: depth. It is in this voluntary silence that great ideas are born, complex thoughts are organized, and the soul finds clarity. Montaigne did not preach total isolation, but rather the importance of knowing how to retreat, of having a mental refuge from excessive stimuli, distractions, and social demands. He believed that the human soul, when left alone, reveals its true greatness. Most people fear loneliness because they fear facing themselves, but brilliant minds embrace this encounter. It is in silence that they hear their true voice. In a world that glorifies noise, constant presence, and social exposure, Montaigne reminds us that true wisdom lies in stillness, and that often the wisest people are those who know how to step away, not out of weakness, but out of strength. Solitude for the genius is not a prison, it is freedom. Number 2, social noise stifles reason. Michel de Montaigne saw excessive socializing as a subtle trap that robs us of our mental clarity. For him, social noise is made up of useless conversations, gossip, other people's opinions, judgments, and conventions is a slow poison that numbs reason. He believed that the human mind only reaches its full potential when it frees itself from external distractions and immerses itself in silent reflection. Montaigne wrote that by mixing too much with others, we lose sight of what we really think. We absorb ideas and concerns that are not our own. We shape our speech to please others. We repress our questions for fear of appearing different. Instead of thinking freely, we begin to repeat, like echoes, what we hear in social circles. The result, brilliant minds suffocated by trivialities. The philosopher believed that excessive social interaction makes us dependent on the opinions of others and distances us from our own essence. For him, clear thinking requires silence, and silence requires distance. He said that the truly wise do not close themselves off out of arrogance, but because they understand that the time spent on social noise could be used to understand life, themselves, and the world more deeply. It's like trying to light a candle in the middle of a storm. The inner light simply cannot stay lit amid the constant noise. Montaigne saw reason as something delicate, which needs to be protected from excessive stimulation, haste, and futility. In an era that was already noisy, he sought simplicity. Imagine what he would say about our days, filled with notifications, social media, and endless debates. Perhaps he would simply remain silent, and in that silence teach us more than 1,000 words. Because for him, noise not only prevents reason from flourishing, it slowly kills it without us even noticing. Number 3, brilliant people don't fit in, and that's okay. Montaigne understood that brilliant minds, by nature, rarely fit into the molds imposed by society. And far from seeing this as a flaw, he saw it as a sign of authenticity. In a world where most people adapt to belong, the French thinker celebrated those who remain true to their essence, even if it makes them different. He knew that more lucid, questioning, and profound people are not satisfied with the superficial, nor can they feign interest in empty conversations just to appear sociable. Contrary to what many people think, this inadequacy is not arrogance or shyness. It is refined sensitivity, intelligence that perceives the absurdity of what is considered normal. Montaigne believed that those who think too much, feel too much, or observe too much tend to be labeled as strange, cold, or out of place. But in reality, they are just people who see beyond what others see. He argued that we should not force ourselves into molds that suffocate us, nor seek belonging at any cost, as this ends up killing what we have most valuable, our uniqueness. Montaigne asserted that true freedom lies in accepting one's own differences and learning to live well with them, even if that means walking lonely paths. Brilliant people do not mold themselves to please others. They mold themselves to evolve. And often, this evolution requires distancing oneself from environments, groups, or habits that most people embrace without thinking, instead of trying to fit in. Montaigne advised self-knowledge, because those who know themselves deeply do not despair for external acceptance. They understand that not fitting in is not a mistake. It is a sign that you are staying true to yourself. And in a world that demands masks all the time, being true to yourself is an act of courage. Number 4, inner life is worth more than 1,000 connections. For Michel de Montaigne, the true wealth of a human being does not lie in the social connections they accumulate, but in the depth of their inner life. At a time when fame was not measured by likes or followers, he already warned, those who live for the approval of others become slaves to something unstable and empty. Montaigne believed that the only truly indispensable company is that of oneself. He said, "The soul that has no support in itself will be disoriented when removed from the company of others." This means that those who do not build a solid relationship with themselves end up living according to the gaze of others, always molding themselves to be accepted, applauded, or included. But brilliant minds, according to him, are not satisfied with external noise. They seek depth, truth, silence. They know that it is in the silence of the soul that one hears one's own conscience, confronts fears, revises decisions, and finds clarity. Montaigne saw this inner life as an inviolable refuge, a place where no one else can enter and where the true self is revealed. While many chase after groups, parties, applause, and recognition, the truly wise turn inward and find a much vaster and truer universe there. Having 1,000 superficial connections is worthless compared to a mind that has learned to understand, calm, and guide itself. The crowd may offer distraction, but only introspection offers growth. Montaigne did not despise socializing, but he saw it as secondary, a choice, not a necessity. The essential thing for him was to be at peace with himself. Because those who cultivate their inner life can lose everything on the outside and still remain whole on the inside. And that is the true secret of freedom, not depending on anyone else to feel peace. Number 5, isolation is not weakness. It is controlled strength. Montaigne knew that true isolation, that which is consciously chosen, is not a sign of weakness, but of strength in its purest and most controlled state. In his day, as today, many saw the act of withdrawing as cowardice, as if the individual were running away from reality. But for Montaigne, the opposite was true. Isolating oneself is an act of courage for those who decide to face themselves without masks, without distractions, without the crutch of social approval. He argued that the mind needs silence to organize the chaos of the world, and that only the strong can bear to be alone with their own thoughts. The weak need noise, distractions, crowds, not for pleasure, but for escape. The strong, on the other hand, choose seclusion not out of arrogance or superiority, but because they recognize that there are times when growth requires distance. Montaigne believed that there is power in restraint, the power to observe without reacting, to reflect before speaking, to step away without losing oneself, and this is something that few people can do. In his view, the truly wise are those who learn to be whole even in silence, who maintain their dignity and clarity even when far from the social stage. In this context, isolation becomes a tool for refinement. It is in distance that the mind sharpens its thinking, that the spirit grows stronger, and that authenticity flourishes. Unlike imposed solitude, voluntary isolation is a powerful choice. It is like a warrior who, even though he has the strength to fight, chooses to retreat to train, meditate, and prepare. Montaigne saw this gesture as one of the highest forms of emotional intelligence and self-control, because in the end, those who master the art of being alone also master the art of living. And this is not weakness. It is a strength that few dare to cultivate. Michel de Montaigne invites us to make a radical shift, to exchange our obsession with belonging for the serenity of being true to ourselves. His message is not against coexistence, but against dependence on it. Instead of seeking validation in the eyes of others, he challenges us to build an inner world so strong that no criticism, absence, or loneliness can bring us down. Montaigne shows that a brilliant mind does not need to shout to be heard. It simply lives with such depth that its presence, even in silence, transforms everything around it. At a time when we are pushed to be visible at any cost, he reminds us that there is more wisdom in those who withdraw, observe, and choose the right moment to act. And perhaps this is the secret that few accept. Living with lucidity is often going against the grain of the world, not out of contempt, but out of clarity. Montaigne does not propose permanent isolation, but selective presence. He does not propose rejection of the world, but control over how much of it we let into ourselves. Because in the end, it is not about running away from people, but about never losing yourself.